Let's take a look at mixed fraction equations with mixed numbers up to 10. Our directions are to add, simplify your answer, and write it as a proper fraction or as a whole or mixed number. Okay, and they're asking me to add 3/5 plus 1/5. Now the rule when you're adding fractions is they need to have a common denominator. Common means the same, denominator means the bottom number before you can add. Now in this case, they already have a common denominator because both bottom numbers are 5. So in this case, I can go ahead and add. If they did not, I would have to do an extra step to rewrite them with a common denominator first. Now, keep in mind when you have a fraction always represents the part out of the whole thing, right? So 3/5 would mean if I have 5 slices of something, right? I have 3 slices out of a total of 5. This would mean I have 1 slice out of a total of 5. So the total doesn't change. If these were out of a total of 5, my answer is still going to be out of a total of 5. That's why you always keep that bottom or denominator the same. And then on the top, I can simply add. If I have 3 parts and then another 1 part, 3 plus 1 gives me a total of 4. So I have 4 out of 5, or 4/5. Okay, this time I want to add 1/3 plus 2/4. Now notice this time I do not have a common denominator, right? One has a denominator or bottom number of 3, the other has a denominator or bottom number of 4. So the first thing I want to do is rewrite these two fractions with a common denominator. Now one way to come up with your common denominator is to simply multiply the two denominators together, right? 3 times 4 would give me 12. And the reason that that works is because when I multiply them together, it's going to give me a number that 3 and 4 both go into, right? 3 and 4 are both going to be factors of 12 since 3 times 4 gives me 12. Now doing it that way does not always give you the smallest number. If you had really big numbers, you might want to check and say, is that really the smallest number that these both go into? But in this case, if you think of the multiples of 3, right? 3, 6, 9, 12, and the multiples of 4, 4, 8, 12, 12 is the smallest number that 3 and 4 both go into. Okay, and then from here, I want to first change 1/3 to something out of 12 that has the same value as this. So I have to first think, well, what did I do in the denominator? It was a 3 and I made it a 12. So I had to have multiplied by 4, right? 4 times 3 gives me 12. So whatever number I multiplied by on the bottom, I want to multiply by the exact same number on the top. So I'm going to multiply this by 4 as well. 4 times 1 gives me 4. So this means 1/3 has the same value as 4/12, right? I multiplied both numbers by 4. And then I'm going to do the same process to change 2/4 to something out of 12. So how many times does 4 go into 12? 3 times, right? 4 times 3 gives me 12. So if I multiplied the bottom number by 3, I also have to multiply the top number by 3. So 2 times 3 gives me 6. Okay, and then from here, it's the same idea as what we did in the last problem. Remember, the denominator does not change. If I have 4 out of 12 and I add 6 out of 12, I know my answer is still going to be out of 12. And then I add the parts, or I add the numerator or top number. 4 plus 6 gives me 10. So this means I have 10 out of 12. Now notice they did tell us to simplify our answer. So I want to see if I can simplify 10/12. So to simplify a fraction, you want to see if there's a factor that goes into 10 that also goes into 12. Well, these are both even numbers. Any even number is going to have a factor of 2. So I can rewrite 10, right? 10 is 2 times 5, and 12 is 2 times 6. And just rewriting it that way to show the factor of 2, now I can say I can cancel out a factor of 2 on the top with a factor of 2 on the bottom, And that leaves me with just 5/6, or 5/6. Okay, 7 4/5 minus 6 2/5. Okay, so we have mixed numbers here, which mean they have a whole number part and also a fraction part. Now there's a few different ways to handle this. One way would be to make them improper fractions and do exactly what we did before. But in this case, I could also just say, let me subtract the whole number from the whole number and the fraction from the fraction, right? So if I said 7 minus 6, that would give me a whole number of 1. And then for the fraction part, if I said 4/5 minus 2/5, well, I would still be out of 5, right? They already have a common denominator, so the denominator would stay the same. And then I can subtract and say 4 minus 2 would leave me with 2. So this would be 1 2/5. 6 times 8 1/3. Okay, so I'm going to change my 8 1/3 to a mixed number just to make it a little easier here. So I'm going to change this and say 8 times 3 is 24, right? So I could write 8 is 24/3, and then it's one more than that, so I'm going to make this 25/3 to represent 8 1/3. And I'm going to multiply that by 6. Now if I want to think of 6 as a fraction, I can write it as 6/1. Now you have a couple options here. You can multiply straight across the way that it is, or you can cancel your numbers first to simplify it first to make your multiplication a little easier. For example, if I look at this, 3 goes into 6 and 3, right? 3 goes into 3 one time, and 3 goes into 6 twice. So if I simplify my fraction first, it's going to make my multiplication a little bit easier to say that 2 times 25 is 50, and 1 times 1 is 1, and 50/1, well, anything over 1 is a whole number, so that would just be 50. One-fifth plus 3/5. Okay, notice I already have a common denominator, meaning the bottom number of those two fractions is already the same. So my answer is going to keep that same denominator, right? 1/5 plus 3/5 is going to give me something out of 5. And then just add the numerator or the top numbers. 1 part plus 3 parts gives me a total of 4 parts. So I have 4/5 or 4/5. 3/6 plus 1/6 plus 1/6. Okay, well notice all three of these have a common denominator, so I can keep that same denominator or bottom number of 6 and just add the parts on the top, right? 3 plus 1 is 4 plus another 1 is 5. So altogether I have 5/6 or 5/6. 2 4/6 plus 4 1/6. Now, I could make them improper fractions and add them together, or I can add the whole number with the whole number, fraction with the fraction. In this case, I think it's going to be a little easier to do that. If I look at the whole number part, 2 plus 4 is going to give me 6. If I look at the fraction part, I have 4/6 plus 1/6. Now those have a common denominator of 6. So I'm going to keep that denominator, and if I add the top or the part, 4 plus 1 gives me 5. So altogether, I would have 6 5/6. Okay, 6 4/5 minus 4 2/5 minus 1 1/5. Okay, Again, I could make these all improper fractions, and if it looked like really complicated, I would. But in this case, I think I'm gonna just subtract the whole number parts and then subtract the fraction parts to see what I have. So looking first at just the whole numbers, 6, 4, and 1, right? 6 minus 4 minus 1. Well, 6 minus 4 is 2 minus another 1 is going to leave me with 1. Now look at just the fraction parts. 4/5 minus 2/5 minus 1/5. They already have a common denominator. If they were all out of 5, my answer is going to be out of 5. And then on the top, I'm going to subtract 4 minus 2 minus 1. Well, 4 minus 2 is 2, minus 1 leaves me with just 1. So altogether, I'm left with 1 and 1/5. One-fourth divided by 4. Okay, well, we can think of 4 as 4 over 1. And what I want you guys to remember is that when you're dividing, you can always choose to multiply by the inverse. So I can say times the inverse of 4 over 1 will be 1 over 4. So this means the same thing as 1/4 times 1/4. And then when you multiply with fractions, we're going to go straight across the top and straight across the bottom. So if I multiply across my numerator or top, 1 times 1 gives me 1. And across the denominator or bottom, 4 times 4 gives me 16. So I'm left with 1 out of 16. 6 divided by 2/3. Okay, well, we can think of this as a 6 over 1. And then remember, you can always multiply by the reciprocal or multiply by the inverse, right? So let's think of this as 6 over 1 times the inverse or reciprocal is when you flip the second fraction. So 2/3 would become 3 over 2. And then I'm going to simply multiply across the top and multiply across the bottom. So in the top or the numerator, 6 times 3 is 18. And in the bottom or the denominator, 1 times 2 is 2. So if I wind up with 18 over 2, or 18 divided by 2, that's going to leave me with 9.